right, we're out here cleaning this 41-pound buffalo caught out of the Tennessee River with a bow and arrow, by the way. That's a lot easier than catching them on a hook. You ever see a scale that big? You can use that for a paint scraper. So we're asking, you're asking the questions. Jared's got them there, going to read them to us, and I'm going to try to answer your Bible questions. Now, I've not seen any of these questions. So it's a lot easier on me not have to prepare for it. Just go fishing and then come in and answer your questions. By the way, have you ever cleaned a big old buffalo? Cut out that dark meat. I'm going right down the center here where that joint is. And same thing with a carp. Turn it over and cut out that strip of dark meat that you see run right down the center right there. Makes it a lot better. What's your first question there, Jared?
Is Jesus racist because he called a Canaanite woman a dog in Matthew 15:26? Could you please explain the use of the word dog?
Okay, in the Bible, dogs represent unbelievers. To a Jew, a dog is an unclean animal, obviously, and so when you call someone a dog, you were calling them like we would today. They're a dog. And so Jesus was speaking appropriately for his day and age from the perspective of a Jew, but he was also speaking appropriately from God's perspective. You know what the Bible actually calls all of us? It calls us worms. He says that we're a generation, the Jews, he said, we're a generation of vipers. He said that the religious leaders were like dead men's tombs. They're whitewashed on the outside, but were inside full of corruption. Now, that's a pretty sick thing to call somebody. Like I said, he called Judas a son of perdition. So, calling him a dog was a pretty good term relative to those others. Now, why? Because we sing a song in church that concerning Christ died for such a worm as I. At the cross where I first saw the light, for he died for such a worm as I. In fact, when Jesus was hanging on the cross, as recorded in Psalm 22, he was praying to God, and he said of himself, I am a worm and no man. So calling her a dog was a little matter. When you understand the sinfulness of the human race, when you see the depravity, you realize that there is no low name that we don't deserve. Now, in terms of the ethnocentrism of that question, in other words, was he preferring one race over another? Absolutely. The Bible tells us there in Romans chapter 9, 10, and 11, that God chose the Jewish race, that he loved them. And he gives an illustration. He says, Jacob have I loved, but Esau have I hated. God has a right, he said, as a potter, to prefer one pot over another one. He said he makes them both. He makes one to glory and honor, and he makes one to fitted for destruction. And so when God sees the Gentiles worshiping as the Samaritans did, false gods, sees them engaged in idolatry, to call them a dog is not at all degrading, because that's exactly the way they conducted themselves. You remember the time in Genesis chapter 6 when God came down to view the human race? And he said, all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. It repented me that I've made man. I'll destroy him from whom I've created from off the face of the earth. And God destroyed every soul except the 8 that were on the boat, Noah, because it said that Noah was perfect in his generations and the others were not. So ethnocentrism for the sake of the ethnic group would be sinful. It'd be pride on the part of the person who relegates another race or another ethnic group to some lower status. But when God views the Jewish people as his preferred people for the sake of bringing the Messiah into the world, he has a right to do that. Now, he told them at another place, he said, I didn't choose you because you're greater in number or more mighty, not because they were more worthy. He said, because you're not. He said, I chose you that I might make my name known among you. So God has a right to choose. He has a right to, well, that's a nice piece of fish there, isn't it? That's just a part of that. I'm going to get 4 or 5 meals of that. God has a right to choose whom He will and love whom He chooses to love. And so I would never second guess Him and say, hey, you have no right to prefer the Jewish people over the Gentiles. But we found an interesting thing in chapter 9 and chapter 11 of Romans, is that God, after that date, set aside the Jews and chose the Gentiles. And today we live in a dispensation when God is giving preferential grace to the Gentiles. But He said, watch out, one day He will set aside the Gentiles and He'll once again choose the Jewish people and do His work through them.
If you would like to ask a Bible question, email us at biblequestions@nogreaterjoy.org or call at 931-805-4820.